Yeah, boy.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to yet another top 5 Outward video. Today is a pretty special episode as we are talking about Chakrams, my personal favorite weapon in Outward and one of the most unique ways to play a mage. It's basically like using a melee weapon but with your mana instead of stamina. Now, Chakrams are borderline OP when it comes to impact. All the skills you can use with this weapon shove enemies to the ground quickly, mainly because the disc hits multiple times. This allows you to get into a fight and deal very high damage immediately. Unfortunately, this also means Chakrams have one major drawback. If you miss, you're dead. Now, this could be said for any weapon, I get that, but Chakrams themselves have longer animations. The disc moves back and forth, causing there to be a much longer wait from when you initially attack to when you can move again. Especially when compared with other magic like sigils, you start to see how long the animations really are. So these are extremely cool and fun to mess with, but they do take some skill. Knowing what kinds of attacks different enemies have is huge for mastering Chakrams, and luckily there are some really top-notch options to choose from with this weapon type. So let's check out the top 5 Chakrams in Outward Definitive Edition. At number 5, we have the Forged Glass Chakram. This beautiful weapon can be looted from ornate chests in Caldera, and it does some pretty cool things. The big stat you might notice is the barrier. When in your offhand, it offers one additional barrier to the player, which helps out against elemental attacks. Arguably, the Vigilante Chakram would be better here as it offers 2 protection. However, that weapon has pretty low damage. The Forged Glass, on the other hand, deals 48 physical damage and 40 impact. This is a huge amount of physical damage. Hitting even a gargoyle still feels okay, and those things are highly resistant to physical damage. It's a fantastic option when looking into some more physical attacks and trying to find some good defense. One barrier is low, but the more you get, the more effective that one becomes. Also, you have to give the Forged Glass Chakram some credit. All of the weapons from this type look at least interesting, but this guy is gorgeous. Probably one of the most beautiful weapons in Outward. With decent durability, high damage, and some barrier, it's a fantastic option. Not the best, of course, but really solid in most cases. At number 4, we have the Ornate Chakram. Unfortunately, this guy deserves to be much higher on the top 5 list. There are some really darn good Chakrams, which is why it's in the 4th spot, but don't sleep on it. With a cool look, giving off light, and feeling razor sharp, it hits hard with 40 physical damage and 41 impact. Nothing crazy, and right now just seems a bit normal. But the developers added a little bonus enchantment to this spinning blade of doom. Enchant it with Musing of a Philosopher. It's a Soroborian enchant, making it not too bad to get. All Chakrams can be enchanted, but only with Hampered from Caldera. A pretty subpar enchant, all things considered. This one for the Ornate, however, is S tier. What it does is add 4 frost and fire damage to the weapon, meaning it not only does amazing physical damage, but now elemental, which helps you cut through enemy defenses. Additionally, this enchant adds the Chill and Scorched Hex, which means after only 3 hits, the enemy becomes 25% weaker to fire and frost damage. Since the Ornate now has that damage type, it absolutely destroys opponents. Add on top of this the Torment skill, which allows you to activate hexes, and you can burn the enemy while also taking chunks from their health. The Ornate Chakram seems dull at first, but with this enchantment, it's one of the most versatile weapons. Use Hex Magic, Chakram Magic, elements, and physical attacks all with one item. It's even better when paired with a good one-handed weapon that deals either fire or frost damage as well. The possibilities are endless and make the Ornate Chakram an extremely good option for a Chakram build. At number 3, we have the Distorted Experiment. This guy was originally second on this list, but after some more testing, there was one other that beat it out. You see, the Distorted Experiment is the single most unique weapon in Outward. It deals 0 physical damage, but 7 in every single element. You also get it by traveling through portals, and the thing itself has a portal inside it. An extremely mysterious weapon that never deals bad damage. Every enemy is weak to something, so why not use all the elements every single time just to be safe? Considering you can buff elemental damage up pretty well, this guy could deal some incredible damage. Because this item never deals weak damage, it must be among the best Chakrams. And when used correctly, it can be devastating. Now, with all that said, I do have some issues with it. For starters, it decreases your status resistance by 10%. You could argue this means very little, and I agree. Status resistance means almost nothing if you aren't getting hit, and won't be an issue most of the time. But it's a negative, meaning we have to watch for it regardless. Next, we have the fact that it deals only 7 damage in every element. When added up, we get a total of 35 elemental damage, which is a lot, but take into account most enemies are highly resistant to at least one of those. Then it becomes a lot harder to buff every element at once. Decay, for example, can reach almost 300% extra damage bonus if you go all in on it. When attempting to buff every element, you get much lower percentages. This is still an extremely good weapon and it will destroy every enemy no matter what you're facing. But I think there are still 2 better options because of the minor cons I just mentioned. If you do want to give this a try, consider using the Rustlich armor. That set will make you deal no physical damage whatsoever, but the Distorted Experiment doesn't even have any. And it buffs every damage type as well. Almost as if it was made for that armor. At number 2, we have the Zar Chakram. This disc was going to be under Distorted Experiment at first, but after testing it, the raw power of this much physical damage was just too much. The Zar Chakram deals 60 physical damage and 48 impact. It's a monster, cutting through enemies like they're butter and knocking monsters on their butts faster than you can blink. The sheer force of a metal such as Zar being thrown into your body is enough to make a man shudder. Add in the fact that discipline is required to use Chakrams, and that buffs this damage even further. I will say it's a bit harder to buff physical damage for armor and still have good mana cost. However, you simply don't need extra damage. Sometimes Zar weapons just hit the spot perfectly, and this Chakram is a masterpiece. I wanted some other Chakrams to be better than Zar, I really did, but just playing with it felt almost unfair. Now, to get it, you will need to take the Sauroborgian's faction quest. This is the only way to get it, meaning you're locked into that faction unless you legacy chest it. Luckily, this isn't even a bad thing because the faction quest grants you cooldown, which is extremely useful for Chakrams. So you get a great passive, a great weapon, and a very nice story. Gunning for the Zar Chakram is a fantastic idea, and with infinite durability, you can always rely on it. The Zar Chakram starts out with much more damage than any other Chakram, making it nearly unbeatable as the best Chakram. At number 1, we have the Frozen Chakram. How could this be even stronger than Zar, you might ask? Well, it inflicts elemental vulnerability, which almost answers that question already. This will make enemies weak to every single element by 25% in only 3 hits. Even better, the Frozen Chakram deals around 22 cold damage. So, this weapon essentially buffs itself and then deals excellent damage. Consider the fact that frost damage is not resisted by most enemies, and you're going to be wrecking monsters left and right. The Frozen Chakram can be a bit challenging to get. I mean, it costs 2,000 silver from the Sauroborgian Caravaner. He only sells it when he's out in the open world, meaning you have to have that money on you when you find him. But if you do get it, it's game over. 500 durability makes it second only to Zar in terms of never breaking. Pair it with something like Brand, and you're absolutely stacked. Hit the enemies with both weapons, and they're 50% weak to frost and 25% weak to physical. Both the Frozen Chakram and Brand deal physical and frost damage. This combination is what really makes the Frozen Chakram shine. It becomes incredibly easy to kill opponents, especially ones already weak to cold. High impact, capable of knocking over enemies instantly. Crazy damage that kills fast without any armor buffs. How could you not want to use this weapon after knowing all this? The Frozen Chakram makes all other Chakrams honestly look a bit silly. There are some great options, and each is strong in its own way, but the Frozen Chakram is king. After extensive playtime with this weapon, I can assure you, it's the best Chakram. And there you have it, guys, the top 5 Chakrams in Outward Definitive Edition. This is an extremely special weapon type that has always been one of my favorites. It packs such a punch and you don't see it in many games. It does take a bit of skill to use, and managing the mana consumption takes some getting used to. But once you go Chakram, you can never go back. I also want to mention some interesting chakrams that are cool, but not quite the best 5 in Outward. The Mysterious Chakram is, of course, awesome. I mean, it's a literal pizza given to you by an insane person living in a barrel. But wow, is the damage really bad. Definitely a pure goofy item added in just for fun. The Galvanic Chakram inflicts pain and is a reward from the MK Golem. This item is decent, but doesn't really deal enough physical damage. Pain is so easy to inflict, it feels kind of unneeded most of the time. But still an option. Lastly, we have the Astral Chakram, which would pair really well with a Hex build. It inflicts Doomed and Curse. Sadly, the impact is absolutely terrible on this item, and Ornate Chakram would be much better for adding hexes. Maybe use an Astral one-handed with the Ornate to get multiple hexes instead. Oh, and I always liked the idea of the Thorny Chakram. It's not very good at all, but feels like a neat idea regardless. Hopefully you enjoyed this little showcase of chakrams, and maybe it will give you enough inspiration to try the weapon yourself. There's a lot of fun to be had with the top 5 chakrams, and now you know which ones those are. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you next time.